What's up, guys? I'm gonna start this wavy flag. I'm not gonna get real far today. A lot's happened. One of the dogs got out. I chased him down around the neighborhood for about an hour. So definitely not getting the start that I wanted of the day. I'm gonna rip these boards down and get started on this how-to. So this is True Allegiance's how-to video on making a wavy flag. Here we go. Okay, so first things first with the wavy flag is I buy the 4-foot 2x6s from Lowe's. They are, I guess, considered a hobby board, what they sell. Anyway, 4-foot 2x6s, and we're going to rip them down so we get 2 stripes for one board. So we'll have a stripe left over, but rip it down to 2 3/4, and you'll get an even half. So we're going to do that right now. Alright, so once I have these 2x6s ripped down to halves, what I do is I bring them over to my saw, mark them off at 38 inches, 38 to 40. You mark these, and then we're going to cut them all. Alright, so there they are, all 13 ripped down. So they're 2 3/4, 1.5 by 38 inches long. And it's simply 2x6s cut in half. So usually what I do, because you're going to get 2 boards per the one. Let's see, trying to find some. I've already mixed them up. But what I do is, like these here, these came off the same board, so I obviously cut them from the different ends so they're not the exact same. But also what I do is I'll mix them up. Just mix them up nice to where the knots are not all in the same position, not all in the same area. And then once that's done, I flip them over. So the sawn ends, I flip them over so they are the back side of the flag. Because all these rounded edges and everything, they're going to be carved anyway. So if you want a nice flat back, just flip them over. Alright, so I got them all flipped over. The curved edges are on the top. And don't worry if your edges are 100% even, it doesn't matter. You're going to be carving it anyway. That's another thing why I do it the way I do, is because you don't have to really worry about getting anything leveled up until it's time to glue and screw. So we got the vice clamps, or the bar clamps, I'm sorry. I have a pretty good system here that I have. It's actually going into my table, and I have one sawhorse. So it's kind of like an extension for me with clamps. But yeah, now once you got it all clamped, it's going to be there until you're pretty much done carving. And I'll show you later on down in the video is when I get the waves on this side, I completely take off the first and last stripe so I can complete it. Because you're not going to be able to carve while it's in the clamps like this. So I take the first and last stripes off and complete it on the table over here. So it's ready to start carving, so I guess we're gonna carve. I may have forgot to mention that 5-gallon bucket's full of sawdust from the last wavy flag that I did. So plan on making a mess. Before we get started, I want to show you some of the tools that you're going to need. A grinder. This is a Hercules Harbor Freight top of the line. The 4-inch metal grinding disc is what you're going to grind your wood with. They do make wooden discs for carving, but they're like over $100 a piece. They really are. You can go to Harbor Freight, Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, and get this for maybe $8. Sanding discs. So after you're done carving and everything, you gotta go back over with sanding discs. For the longest time, I did it with a palm sander, and it took me forever. So I don't use a palm sander. Whoa. I don't use a palm sander until the very final sand. When it's ready to clear coat, pretty much, or ready to stain. So yeah, stock up on sandpaper, sanding discs for your grinder, and one of these lasts for about 3 or 4 flags before you got to replace it, so it's fairly inexpensive. So before I start grinding on this thing, I just want to let you guys know there's no method to the madness. Just go to town on it with your grinder. The wave of a flag is pretty much, if you ask me, kind of like Bob Ross painting a nature scene. It can't go wrong. There's no, specific angles or how many leaves are on a branch. So these waves, it just goes. You know what I mean? There's no right or wrong. So that's the great part about it. Don't forget these. Alright, so we got our first wave cut. Let me turn it around so you can see. Alright, so here's the first wave. Them tags off there. Pretty simple. If you notice, this side is a lot shallower than this side. And what I go for on that is nothing symmetrical. Nothing's going to be the same. Like I said, there's no right or wrong, but if you do some of these things that I do, that I've discovered over time, it makes it look less methodical and a little more realistic. All right, as we started our second wave, what I learned early on is to determine where your union's going to be. So I always carve it as it sits, and I plan on stars being here. Do not put a lot of detailed waves within your union area, because that's just going to make it harder to paint your stars in. It's never really that easy to put the stars on as it is, but the more detail you have in it, the more waves you have in it, the more difficult it's going to be to finish. Now, as you watch me grind, I start with one side and I grind down with the side, kind of cutting a line, and then I feather it out. And then on this side, I go at an angle and I feather that out as well. What I do to get rid of that line that I cut in there is I kind of put the blade at an angle and ride it along so it gets that curve, that natural curve to the wheel. That helps a lot too. That's just a technique that I learned as I was building them. It helps a lot though. Alright, she's starting to take shape now, isn't she? Get some good light. So, I had a lot of dead space here in between these two. For one reason, that I don't always take the waves, the deep part of the wave, and go all the way through. You don't have to. It's just my style. Like I said earlier, it just makes it look less uniform, less symmetrical. So I kind of cut one, and then I go off of that wave to this one, to where it kind of curves around too. You know what I mean? So I had a lot of dead space right here. So what I did is just dug a little shallow area right here in between the highest part of the wave, just to keep it from looking flat right here, and I think that does it justice right there. So, but yeah, it's just going off your instinct and what you think will look good. Alright, so I am ready to go ahead and start grinding on the sides. Take this mask off. So what I do when I grind on the sides is I just leave about 3/4 of an inch of a line. I just grind it in. What I do is I just grind it in until it's flush. So especially here, I just use the contour of the grinder and go to town. Right here, contour of the grinder, get it in there, and then I go along. So I'll go do that right now. Alright, so that's the depth. I usually just go a little bit more than flush. Just a little bit. Probably about a 1/2 inch or so. Maybe a little more. It all really depends on your preference, but I don't like bringing it in too much. That just compromises the strength of the sides here. So I like to leave it at that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back through under and fix this up and fixed this here up to make it a little more smooth. Alright, so what I did was, I told you guys before that I would take this off and do this separately on the table. Well, I always try to get the corners on all 4 sides carved to match up with this side, just to make sure it's a little more it matches up correctly and it looks good. So that's the one side. What I do need to do now, instead of having this flat corner, or this corner right here, is I'm gonna carve it down to where it looks like it's folded down. So we don't want any sharp edges on these things. Alright, so we got the edges rounded over on that, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and smooth these out, round these over. I round them over from the bottom and the top, and a lot of the times what I do is I just hard grind the top and a little bit of the bottom, and then I finished up that curvature on the sides with the palm sander. I find it a little bit easier to do with a hand sander, and it's less of these hard, deep scratches that you have to get out from the side. So there's that, less of a hard edge on it. I think that looks much better. So what I do once I soften up this edge, I go back under and soften up that edge, then go back with the grinder and go flat, just to give you more of a corner on the bottom. I'll show you right now how I do the bottom and the top stripe when I take it out. Okay, so I have the bottom stripe removed, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take 2 of my 3-inch screws that I use to assemble these. I'm just going to screw it to the table. Now you're going to reuse these screws because I usually put 4 screws into the bottom. Alright, this one's finished. So once you get the depth that you like, mine's about a finger, which is fairly decent. Once you get your depth, make sure you come back and angle and smooth out underneath to where it's almost curved into there. And then once you got the face of the flag curved, come back through with your grinder and get a nice edge, again flat, and it turned out good. Alright, so now we have all the sides carved. I think we are ready to start gluing and screwing. Alright, so we're ready to glue it up. What I do is I take the first and last stripe and I do those last, because what we're going to do is we're going to individually clamp and glue every 2 stripes while we're adding our screws. And then once we have all this glued together, and then we screw and glue the last 2 stripes to make it complete. Alright, before I start screwing, this is what I use. I use the exterior decking screws with the 25 T25 Torx bit. When I started, I used regular deck screws, and these work 100 times better. These are 3-inch screws, to where it's going to go through my first one into my second one and secure it like I need it to be secured. So yeah, you can find these at Lowe's. This is where I do all my shopping. We don't have a HD here. But yeah, T25 Torx bits does wonders. Alright, if you have noticed, I did put some cardboard down on the floor just for squeeze out purposes. I do have mats on my floor, so I don't like to get glue all over them. When you are screwing the strips together, you want to get high spots. You don't want to put any screws inside the deep part of your flag. So I always do 4 in each stripe in the high spots and as close to the end as I possibly can.